Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. Today on the podcast, the introduction would take too long. We're back with part 2 with Marty Liquori. We'll talk about all kinds of stuff and what he's been doing lately. Enjoy.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about some of the other people of the era. You ran a lot of races. You ran a lot of indoor races. You ran a lot of, I think the nugget is never lost a relay race while at Villanova. Does that ring true to you?
No, I'm sure I lost a relay race. I didn't lose any races at the Penn relays.
Ah, okay.
And I didn't realize it. And actually, Walt Murphy's newsletter, because I just had a birthday, so he was going over some of my stats. And he mentioned that I had 13 Penn relays watches because I won a couple after the relays. When I was out of college, they had a 5,000 meter run, and I won. And I said, Walt, I don't think I have 13. I think I have 12. I think that freshman 4x400 relays, we didn't get watches, we got medals. And I think we're still pissed about that. But he checked and he said, you're right. The Penn relays lists you as 12 watches. So yeah, I didn't lose a relay in college at the Penn relays, but I do have to say there were 9 of them, and I only got to stick behind like a foot one time. So I always got the lead. And if I had gone to Iona, I would have, I don't know how many watches, but I went to Villanova, so I have 12.
Just to bring up a couple other people of the era, the one race that is one of the early broadcast races was a 2-mile race. Lindgren, you and Shorter. Do you remember that race?
I do not remember that.
Oh, and I'll send you the link. Yeah, it was
no, you're right. Here's the thing. That thing came up on YouTube, and I'm watching it, and I'm trying to figure out where the heck was this. Then I'm thinking, I'm just going to sit on these guys and probably win this race. Then I drop way back. This kid, Prefontaine, ends up winning the race. That wasn't a race. That was, we were in Hawaii a week or two. The U.S. team was going to go against the Soviet Union in Los Angeles, and they took us to Hawaii to train. And that race was like a training thing. I had a bad foot at the time, and it was a dirt track. I don't know what Shorter's deal was. Apparently, Cree's not around to say it, but Jerry's probably going to say it was a real race. But I don't remember it ever being on television when it really happened. And somebody maybe just had video of the race or of the workout that they did. There are other races that I will see where I don't really remember who won them or if I won them. There's one race I did watch that I thought I had won by a comfortable margin. And when I saw the replay, I realized I won it by the skin of my teeth. And the other weird thing I had, a lot of people know about the race I had with Yifter, second race I had in Dusseldorf, where he set a national record and I set a national record. And I won't go into all the strategies that were involved, but he knew he needed to take off early on me and not wait around for me to kick. Around the last turn, and for 30 years, I thought going around the last turn that I had stepped on his heel at one point, that it was that close. And then when I saw it on television, I realized I wasn't within 20 yards of him the whole last turn.
Yeah, he went way, he belted way out ahead.
He did that because 10 days earlier in Zurich, I had outkicked him by making the first move. So he knew this. That was one of the stupidest things I did. What happened in Zurich was I had come from Gainesville. I didn't know what kind of shape I was in. but just over a lap to go, I can see the timer that if I run a 60-second quarter, I'm going to break a guy who went to Stanford's American record, Sandoval, I think, Tony Sandoval. I'm going to break his American record. I just need to run 60. So with 450 yards to go, I just go flat out. I go buy Dick Quacks. I go buy Yifter, and go down the backstretch. I've got a lead, but I'm just running against the clock. I think these guys are eventually going to catch me. They don't catch me. And as I said, I had been in Gainesville. I hadn't been on the circuit. Yifter probably didn't even know who I was. In that race, I let him know who I was. So 10 days later, when we get to the race that really counts, he's watching me the whole time. He's watching me. He's not letting me make the first move. And he jumps out and he makes the first move. And to get onto tactics, there are people who I have advised that sometimes you need to throw the races before the Olympics to throw people off of what your strengths and your weaknesses are. There was one time when El Garouge, I think it was, upset in the Olympics by a Kenyan guy. People wrote in and said that my commentary must have been done after the race was over, because I wouldn't have said what I said live. And I think what I said live is that he's in trouble. He's going to lose the race. And the reason I knew that was I had been to Zurich, which was before the Olympics by a week or two. I had watched a Kenyan guy come down the straight. El Garouge is undefeated for 2 years. So what does he have to do? He's got to win every race to prove he's the best. Like this Ingridson situation. He's got to prove he's dominant. The Kenyan guy doesn't have to prove anything. He's behind him and he's saying, oh, okay, I know I can get this guy, but I'm not going to let him know until 3 weeks from now. And so that was a case of that. And as you have, when you spend a life in this sport, you can see little things that other people can't see. I wish I had this whatever gift with computers or something else that would really translate into financial success. But I can recognize a person's stride from a mile away and who it is and maybe what country he's from. But that was the case there. I had an athlete one time that I was helping coach, and I said, everybody thinks that you have no kick. So the last 3 races before the Olympics, you're going to go out with 400 to go and let them catch you. And then in the Olympics, they're going to let you go, but you're not coming back. Unfortunately, that person got injured before the Olympics, and we never got to use that strategy. Or maybe there'd be another American gold medalist in the 1500.
That's correct. That's probably about the highest compliment you can get as an analyst. You must have seen the race one time ahead of everybody else. That's
well,
great.
Actually, yeah. And mention him again. Walt Murphy got on the internet and said, hey, I'm the statistician. I'm there. Marty called that race live.
That's great. Let's talk more about the other things in your life. As running and races come to mind, we could talk about what you'd like, but West Coast turned into, how did you go to end up in Florida? You went to Gainesville. You weren't a West Coast stockbroker your whole life. And how did that transition count?
I had a postgraduate scholarship after I got out of Villanova, and I had just come back from the Olympics. And the Villanova Law School wouldn't let me go to law school because I was going to miss 2 weeks while I was at the Olympics. They said, you've got to wait a year. At the same time, the NCAA scholarship said, if you don't use it in October, you lose it. So I was going to go somewhere, and I looked into journalism, and I came close to going out to Oregon. I came down to Gainesville at the urging of Jimmy Carnes and realized that the University of Florida had an excellent journalism school, along with a TV station that was on every day. One of the things that weighed on my mind was if I was in Oregon and my elderly parents got ill, it would take me a long time to get home. And if I came to Florida, Frank Shorter was down here, but also I could hop in the car and be home in 18 hours. And I tell the story because it's so silly. My parents were 55 years old.
Huh.
My father just died a year ago. He's 94, and my mother's still alive. She's 96. But as a kid, 55 was old to me. And so that was kind of the reasons I came to Florida. And after I was here for one winter, I started the Athletic Attic, and I said, I may go back to Philadelphia, but not till my running career is over. That kind of
Well,
leads into another thing where the guys are signing such huge contracts for running. They're huge in a sense, but had I been brought up in today's world, I may not have started a business like that. I would have been so busy making this money for appearances and this money for running races. And there is one athlete who tried at one point to get him to open stores, and his agents wanted him to do speaking engagements and stuff. Where as the athletes are that we had to get a business, be a teacher, have a regular job. There's benefits to both of those things.
what was the state of shoe stores when you started Athletic Attic? And were you partners?
Jimmy Carnage was my partner. So we started Athletic Attic in 1972 after coming back from the Munich Olympics and seeing people wearing Adidas shoes all day and warm up suits to go to the grocery store. There were no athletic shoe stores. We opened a store. It was originally going to be called Adidas Attic, but that fell through. And so we came up named Athletic Attic. And I coined the name athleisure. So I said, we're going to be selling any kind of shoe you could wear with a pair of jeans. We went to malls and we wanted to have the athletic store in the mall. And they said, no, you can't come in and just sell shoes. You've got to sell fishing rods, baseball bats, and all that stuff. You can't just sell shoes. And we said, we can. We're going to sell the only the most profitable thing. Then 5 years later, those same malls had four shoe stores just like ours in there. But ourselves and Athlete's Foot, which was in Pennsylvania, both started in about 1972 within weeks of each other, not knowing about each other for a year or two as the first stores that just sold athletic shoes. And really, it was really going to be running shoes. Then the running boom then took off, and then eventually basketball shoes got big. So,
Well, then, nearly a decade later, America boycotts the Olympics. What was going on with you then, and what were you thinking about that? The state of
well,
sport and politics.
yeah, I was very upset about it because it was like some of the things today. I got a call that we're going to boycott the Olympics. We've already got South Africa on board and some other countries. South Africa can't go to the Olympics, you idiots. You know, that's like saying Orban is the strong man who really thinks I'm great. And so I was very upset. It was 1980. Had offers to sell my company and a lot of other things going on. And I was just very mad that Carter, nice guy that he is, introduced this political aspect into the Olympics. After that, decided I'm not going to train for another 4 years. So some politician can pull the rug out from under me. I don't remember signing up to be a soldier or a diplomat for the United States. So I pretty much hung it up in 1980. I was struggling with some sciatic nerve problems, and business was overwhelming. There were two things. The other thing that affected a lot of us, I speak for myself and Dick Berkeley, when Steve Prefontaine was killed, a lot of us, we maybe talked earlier about how being so dedicated and one-sided, but Pre and myself and all of us, we all thought this is our shot at life and we're going to work hard for 10 years, but then we're going to have 50 years to enjoy that 10 years. And when Pre died, Dick and I, a lot of us said, no, there's no guarantees here. Maybe we ought to try and live a little bit more normal life. And those are guys who are now in our late 20s. If we were 17, maybe we wouldn't have felt the same way. But I think that Prefontaine's death really hurt the sport in the sense of hurting the motivation of some of the top guys.
How well did you know
I
Prefontaine?
didn't really know him that well. because we weren't in the same event, we were on different coasts. There were a couple times at some indoor meets where we stayed at the house of a guy. We both stayed there, but Pre didn't really sleep there. He came back about 7 in the morning to get his bag because he had an 8 o'clock flight. Because I think he felt, maybe coming from Oregon, where there maybe isn't that much of a nightlife. When he got to one of the big cities, he wanted to have fun. And we were all pretty much like that in those days, because if you weren't having fun, why would you do this sport? There was no money. It was probably costing us all money. Whereas today it's okay. I got to get to bed because I got a race next week and I got to do a 15-miler tomorrow morning. We maybe were of the same mindset that we felt, especially the races up in Canada and all the races in Europe. There were big parties after the races.
I'm in Toronto right now, and you won that Toronto Mile, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Did you remember anything about that, or what Toronto
No,
was
did
like
you
way
write
back
me?
then?
Did you write me about this recently?
I didn't. No,
Oh,
I didn't.
somebody did. And I'm not remembering exactly what their question. They were asking me if I had run in the race in Toronto and had I had conversations about it with the meet director. And I said, yeah, I remember it well, because it was the only time in my life that customs gave me a hard time bringing trophies back into the country. But we did run, and I think there were 2 separate mile races. And I'm not sure what the reason was. It may have been that somebody else didn't want to run in the same race as me. So they had 2 races. In fact, just yesterday, I was with my 7-year-old grandson, and I pulled out all the money that I have from different countries. And he's fascinated by the $2 bills from the United States. And I said, look, I had a stack of $2 bills from Canada. And I remember what happened was I went to the bank in Canada and I exchanged my American money. And then I went to the meet and I'm buying a hot dog or something. And the people working there go, look, he's got $2 bills. Hey, I'll buy Canada. So apparently these things have been out of circulation for years, and the bank just gave me a load of them. So I've still got them, but I'm,
That's great.
trying to teach my grandson about the countries in the world and the different money and that kind of stuff.
One thing to mention is you're in half a dozen or more Hall of Fames. And one of them is an academic honor, and track, international. Are any of those more meaningful to you or surprising to you?
The academic one was surprising. That happened about 2 or 3 years ago, and they called and said, you're going in this year. I looked it up and it said that you had to have a 3.0 in college. And I wasn't sure that I had a 3.0 for one thing. He said, it also has to do with what you've done after college. And I said, what is it you think I've done? And he said, the national spokesman for team and training, a couple other things. So he actually had done his homework. And I said, but it's been 50 years since I got out of college. How come it took this long? He goes, your name's been up there for a long time, but then there was always somebody more important coming up. He said something like that. But what it really was, that the academic Hall of Fame didn't really start until the late 80s. So there's people like myself and Billie Jean King and Bill Bradley who precede that. So every year they put in 10 older people. And so I was in with that bunch. So that was quite an honor. But your original question, of course, the National Track and Field Hall of Fame would be number one. That is amazing how many halls of fame there are.
Let's talk about some other aspects of your life and then get back to running. Certainly team and training, I'm sure, is very dear to you and very personal. There certainly could be fans who aren't aware of that. What can you say about that? You were spokesman for them.
Right. So team and training was a program thought up by the Leukemia Society. And at the time it happened, it was very original. And they asked me if I would be their spokesperson in New York City at the marathon. And I told them no, I didn't have any free time to do stuff. And they got Rod Dixon to do it one year. And then the next year they came back and said, we're going to take this national. can you do it? And I said, what do I have to do? And they said, nothing. I said, then I can do it. 6 months after that, after I said I was going to be a spokesman for the Leukemia Society, I found out that I had chronic lymphocytic leukemia. And getting online, I found out that the Leukemia Society, this would have been in 1980 or so, was raising $2 million a year for research. And I thought, that's got to be a misprint, $2 million a year. But it was true. So team and training starts. And at some point, I had to come out to the newspapers and say, yes, I've got chronic lymphocytic leukemia. And with team and training, we hope to raise $2 or $3 million next year to give towards research. And the guy with the program was like, don't say that. We're never going to get $3 million. It's my job. And I'm going to look bad. We end up like the next year raising 20 million. But at some point, it's raising 70 or $80 million. Basically, the money going for research just skyrockets, 20 million, 30 million. And childhood leukemia is just about cured. The type of leukemia I have, there's been many more treatments. So I feel that team and training had a big part in changing the landscape for leukemia. To get back to that, before that, there was a period of time after you retire from running, and I have a little problem with celebrity stuff, like people who are just famous for being famous, and then other people get excited when they meet them. And there was a period of time when I thought, geez, I can run a 4-minute mile. Big deal. It doesn't put bread on anybody's table. It's just something I did. Then I realized with team and training that becoming famous can be a really great thing if it can be used in another way to raise funds for science and stuff like that. So I felt a whole lot better having spent half my life trying to run around a circle real fast, that it had more of a purpose than that it ever had before team and training.
Yeah, that's a fantastic story. It must make you feel good every time to think about it. Can I ask you personally, how has the disease progressed and come under control for you?
Yeah, the type of chronic lymphocytic leukemia I have at the time looked like people would live for 10 years. And I needed treatment after 5 years, and the doctor said, we've got a new drug. I think it's going to knock it back for 2 years. And after 2 years, maybe we'll have invented another drug. So I had this drug, fludarabine, and basically it's knocked it back for 30 years. And there's been
Nice.
5 other, drugs that have been invented since then. Things happen quickly in the medical fields. And I was fortunate. I had a friend who had polio, and I always felt that I had this chronic disease, but that I was going to be the recipient of timing. Everything's timing in life. If I were 10 years older or had been 20 years before, it probably would have killed me in 5 years. But a
Right.
lot is about timing in life. And so I think I know people whose brothers or sisters have died from leukemia. And to me, that would be driving me crazy, because I know if they were born today, that never would have happened. It would have been 6 months of unpleasantness, but then they'd be okay for the rest of their life. So timing is everything.
That's just a great, important story. But I've worked for 30 years in HIV research, and recently hepatitis C with the University of Texas. I'm a data computer statistic guy,
Okay.
but I've worked alongside overseas in
Right.
AIDS in Africa, and Texas is one of the universities still going after it.
Yeah.
I really appreciate all that.
Yeah. I went to MD Anderson.
Oh, you did? Yeah. Yeah. I work out of the medical school, which is right across the street. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a
Yeah.
great guy, an Australian guy named Dr. Keating. And he was like the world authority on it. And he just recently retired.
Wow. That's a good story. One other thing about your life, let's talk about music.
Yeah.
When did you start? Because you've been going for more than a decade now, playing gigs as a jazz guitarist. What's
Yeah.
going on now?
Well,
How did you get started?
my journey with the guitar was when I was a kid growing up in New Jersey. I saw a lot of other Italian guys getting on the bus at night, going into New York, playing jazz clubs and Broadway shows. And when I was young, I wanted to be a guitarist, maybe go to Juilliard School of Music. At one point, Freddie Dwyer came to my parents and said, "Look, your son has a talent and he's probably going to be able to get a scholarship to college, but he needs to stop playing the guitar on Friday nights before the meets." So I stopped playing the guitar and I didn't touch it for 35 years. Then at one point, somebody asked me to play one song so they could sing their husband a song at a restaurant. And I learned that one song. And the restaurant owner said, "Would you like to play here every Sunday brunch?" I said, "No, this is the only song I know." And I said, "I'll come back." And I came back a couple of years later, was another guitar player, and I was his accompanist. But that's been almost 25 years ago. So I fell into this musical education on the job. I'm in Florida with some retired great jazz musicians who come in. And for 17 years until COVID, we played every Thursday night with a 4 or 5 piece band. I also played on Monday night. I play the style of Django Reinhardt and Stefan Grappelli called Gypsy Jazz. And I've been doing that for a long time. It was like another running career in that you practice on your own and then you go to a meet and you're on a team or a relay team and everybody runs and does their thing. And then you spend an hour talking about what just happened. What was cool, what was not cool. So I got into another family, another niche thing like running where all the people love each other because we all have this weird, I don't know, it's not an addiction, but the thing that,
Passion's an okay word.
yeah, passion that makes us tick. So it's been very good for me and I'm still doing it. It's something people would say, why don't you keep running masters records and stuff like that? I'm like, why would I do something where I know I'm going to get worse every year? I'm going to do something where I know I'm going to get better every year. And people say, why don't you make a CD? And I'm like, you make CDs to get more gigs. And I don't really want any more gigs. I'm not going to travel and have another career where I live in hotels, but I'm doing something that and I don't make the CD because I keep saying next year I'll be better. Next year I'm going to be better. And I do keep getting better in so many ways because music is a really big thing. I think everybody, if they can find something like that, then you wake up every day. Okay, what am I going to learn today? Who am I going to meet? That kind of thing. So it's a lot like running, and also the training is a lot like running in that you've got to force yourself to do things that you don't want to do, you have to do to get better.
It's like the marshmallow test. People who know how to delay gratification are at the top of their game. And you've been at the top of your game in these many different fields over a long time. And I don't want to make it sound negative, but is there anything that in quiet moments you look back on and miss? Is it competing? Is it announcing? Is it talking to millions of people? Is it representing, doing medical? Is there anything, any of those things that have you passed through, done well, enjoyed, left your mark, and you're loving life now with the music? Are there those moments where they come back strong and fondly?
Mm, not really. I think I have a lot of people my age now that they fear retirement because they could be doctors. It could be a lot of things. They're doing something they love. But I tell each of them, you get to a point where you've just had it. And I got to that point with running, and I got to that point with announcing. And you just wake up one day where you had enough of it. It's like eating dessert. You just can't keep eating dessert. You love it, but then you just hit the point, and then you're not going to miss it, at least not for a couple of days. And I think, as you mentioned, every things in my life, when they were over, it was time for them to be over, and then I didn't miss them. And in a lot of ways, it's almost like some other person did that. I can analyze it. And now I'm at the point in my life where going into a restaurant and playing for people who are there really to eat the meal and listen to background music doesn't excite me as much as going into a memory care facility where there's only 15 people, but they snap out of it. They know the words to these songs from the 40s and the 50s. And we have the nurses tell us, oh, this person hasn't spoken 6 months. You just had them singing or you had them up dancing. And that's more attractive to me now than would be to go on tour or play for audiences that are only half paying attention to the music. So everything has its time where it gives you pleasure. And then sometimes it's gone. And if it's taken away, I'm sure initially you miss it, but then you're on to something else. Even talking about the music, people say, why aren't you playing out as much at night? I really would rather spend the evening with my grandkids. They're only going to be little kids for so long. Maybe I'll go back to the music. And that's not something I ever thought that playing catch in the driveway for half an hour would be what I would, want to do the most.
It's great. I take you're still a fan. As we speak, the Brussels Diamond Lake meet is going to be on. Are you watching anything in real time? Fan of track and running these days?
The people are doing some amazing things. I'm interested in the equipment and the tracks and stuff like that. I guess I'd have to say, because of the success of the Americans in the Paris Olympics, that I was even more interested this time. I like following, and I think I always followed it because of the advancement of the human being and what we're capable of. Walt Murphy, I bring up his name again, writing all his historical stuff. And it's just amazing to me that guys had the world record for 5,000 meters, famous names, running 13:59, which sounds crazy to us. I know when I ran 13:15, I did say, look, 13 minutes is definitely possible. But who knows how much faster people can get. When I was running, Europeans would always ask the top guys, do you think I'll ever run under 3:30 for 1,500 meters? And most of the runners would say, no, it's just not possible. But then somebody comes along and nobody told them that what wasn't possible. So it's pretty fascinating. There are still scientific things to be discovered to help you run better. The internet has made every high school kid able to know what the other top guys are doing. And so things are in motion even faster than ever. And I guess that's signified by the fact of how close every one of the races are. It's almost like if you're a company and you've got an advantage because your software is better, you're going to kill everybody. But if it's open source and everybody has the same software, everything's going to get closer and tighter. And that's what we're seeing. I thought Nick could have won the Olympics. The Fisher, the tactics are unbelievable. His tactical sense and different things. I'm just amazed. And I know the pressure that they're under. They're almost like a different species from what we were, shaken up by having 3 reporters interrogate us, and nothing like today with the internet.
The dark side of sports are a little bit, we can all talk about performance enhancing drugs. You have a unique outlook on this, having been involved in the sport for so long, but also the IOC and the U.S. Sports Administration, the Coaches Association. You've been involved with all these things. What's happened to them since the 70s? They headed in the right direction. You have any predictions how the sport's going to make it through this higher rate of change?
I feel that the people who catch the drug cheats are gaining on them, especially when you are going to take the samples at an Olympics and hold them for 8 years and test them later. I think some people just got caught by that. It's like a lot of other criminal enterprises. If people don't get punished, there's not going to be as much of a deterrent. Coupled with that is my understanding of the lives that some of these people lead. They don't live in England or America, the third world countries. We recently had an occasion where an athlete from university here, from a country, I won't name the country, but I think it's got the largest population in the world. They never really had a great 1500-meter runner. I think when he went home after college was finished and they were sending him to the Olympics, they pretty much pressured him into using a performance enhancing drug. So I don't ever want to throw stones at people as to what their motivation was, how they grew up, the pressures. But I think we as Americans can overcome any disadvantage by the society we have and all the things that we have available. I don't think we need to resort to using drugs. So I'm confident they'll get a handle on it, but it's in every sport. Even when I watch tennis, which is a technique sport, I know that the guy, if it goes 5 sets, the guy who's taking performance enhancing drugs, just like with McEnroe and Bjorn Borg, that the drugs make a difference. So I don't know where that's headed.
None of us do. And none of us do. And you're very gracious in how you address these things, not offending anyone, but the messages come through and your outlook is interesting to hear. I think
Here's what I would say, the way I look at it. If you took drugs, I alluded to this in a previous question. Most embarrassing thing for me in life is when some person my age introduces me to their kids and they misstate what I've done. They're always going to overstate it. Oh, this guy won the Olympics or this or that. And that's embarrassing to me. What would be hell for me, or I would think for any person, let's say you are an Olympic champion and you know that you took drugs and you only won by half a second. And you're introduced for the rest of your life as Sir something or other. I'm saying there's anybody named Sir who took it, but you're revered in your country. And for the next 50 or 60 years of your life, you're revered because you won the Olympics. And in the back of your mind, you cheated. I think eventually I would either go mad or, something if I had to live with that fact. The fact might be that when you took that drug, you thought it wasn't illegal, or you thought, oh, everybody else is doing it, and you thought it was justified. But then maybe years later, you realize, no, you know, I was not that much better than any of those guys. And it was only because I took that stuff on that day that I won. It'd be like a survival guilt. And so to me, that would be the worst thing that could happen in life, that you would go through life knowing you're a fraud, even if nobody else knew it. One time I was on CNN with a doctor from New York. We were there to talk about performance enhancing drugs. The doctor said they took a survey and they asked athletes if they could take a drug and win the Olympics and be dead in 10 years, would they do it? And he came up with some number like 80% said they would do it. I said, well, where is this study? I don't think athletes are that stupid that 80% of them would agree to die in 10 years if they could win the Olympics by taking drugs. So he said, I'll send you a copy of that thing. He never sent me a copy because what the survey was, and it was taken by US group, was if you could take a drug and win the Olympics and never be caught, would you do it? Okay, then maybe 80% of that. But the whole death thing to me was very insulting to think that it means that much to us. But I'm getting on a rant here.
that's okay. I've heard that story, and that's an interesting one to bring up. And I'm glad to hear the way that you insisted on following up on that for data. That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
But
he never sent me the copy of it. But yeah, it was a USOC, I think, put the survey out.
what they're trying to accomplish with that, but okay. Yeah, I think coming from a generation and a time and just a personality where hard work is what it took and hard work is what you were willing to put in many phases. And Congratulations on all the things you have accomplished and finding your passion and your family. It's nice to hear. I have to admit, I was a miler starting in 73 in junior high school. And so it's a thrill for me to talk with you and talk running.
Well, thank you. If I can brighten anybody's day, this is an easy thing to do.
All right.
Appreciate it. I like looking back every once in a while.
I can tell you that a lot of people enjoy hearing this. Give me so much time.
So how about Mary Slaney?
I don't have her phone number. I'd love to talk to her. I did. I interviewed Ron Tabb quite a while ago, and
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, Ron, he spent some time in Florida.
yeah,
Yes,
he's on the West Coast.
Yeah, I think he had a sports bar for a while.
Yeah, I talked to him. I talked to him about that as a sports bar. What was it like being a sports owner? And to him, it was just like I just wanted to have the Kansas City Chiefs on the wall and
Yeah.
pictures
No,
of runners.
I think he had one in Florida too.
Yeah, he was a great guy to talk to, and he's doing a podcast now, right, with Benji Durden and Bill Rogers. They interview
Oh,
somebody.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think they just talked to Tom Wysock.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time,
Yeah.
Marty. All the gang I see at the IUP track and field reunion will be thrilled to know that they're going to get to hear from you in person. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Good
All right.
talking.
Thanks, Marty. Bye. Hey, I hope you enjoyed another episode. Do you have someone you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast? You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel or on the website, running70s.com. That's running70s.com. Let me know what you think of the episodes and anyone, including yourself, you'd like to hear interviewed. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.